of HTML, maybe HTML forms, PHP, the database as well, the CSS, as well as some JavaScript there. So I will try to make it as short as possible and maybe focusing on the main issues. Okay, so when it comes to web programming, there are a lot of things that come into play. You cannot just build a website with the HTML only. So there are a lot of things that came to play. That's why you see that you'll be doing HTML, you'll be doing CSS, you'll be doing the JavaScript. At the same time, you'll be doing database. So why? Because whenever you are creating a website, you need all those technologies for you to be able to create the website. So mostly that's what happens. Guys, it's important to make sure that we always join earlier so that I don't need to come here and accepting people. Okay, so basically, that's what you need when it comes to web programming, right? So you are required to know the HTML, to know the JavaScript, maybe some basics, and everything you will develop as you go, right? To know the PHP, the database as well. You have done database before. I know you've done database before as a module. So my SQL is not something new to you. Okay, so basically, for this module, there's a setup that you need to do first, or the requirements before even talking about what is HTML, whatever, all these things. You need what you call the HTML editor, or just a text editor, so that you'll be able to code the HTML, right? So I hope everyone have done that and we've been coding this before. So I'm not going to walk you through how you can do that, but there are a lot of code editors or text editors that you can use. You can even use the Notepad itself, can work. You can use the VS Code. There are a lot of them that you can use for web programming, specifically for web programming. There's the brackets. What else? I think there are a lot of them. There are a lot of them that you can use, right? And then the other thing, which is very, very important, you need what you call a server, right? You need what you call a server so that you'll be able to run the PHP script, so that you'll be able to run the PHP script, right? So basically, why do we need the server? Or why do we install the server instead of just maybe putting the server only without putting some database, whatever? So the server on its own, it's a pack, right? It's a pack that comes with the, I don't know if I can, let me try it. I don't know if I can get my home server. I executed it long back, so I knew it that sometimes it will not open. Okay, but here I'm using the WAMP server. Here I'm using the WAMP server. I've installed the WAMP server. This WAMP server, you can also use the SAMP. Others have got installed SAMP. And this one comes with the database, also comes with the server itself, the Apache server, so that you'll be able to execute your scripts. So how do you do it? You now for me, I'm using Wambu. So I will create my projects inside this folder, Wambu 64, and then inside WW, that's where all my projects will be, right? And we are going to use this demos folder as our project file. This is the one that we'll be using. So that whenever you want to run, you run through the local host, right? So basically, that's what you'll be doing there. So that's the basic thing or the basic setup. So now let's talk about the HTML now. So guys, I think for it to be easier for you, you need to understand why do you need HTML, right? Or what's the role of HTML when you're creating a website instead of just maybe why HTML? Yet you have JavaScript, you have PHP, something like that, right? So the HTML have got its part. So can you make sure that we are all muted, guys? Okay, so the HTML now have got its part, right? So the HTML stands for hypertext markup language, and is the foundation of most web pages and the standard markup language for documents designed to be displayed in a web browser. So this one now defines the contents and the structure of web pages by using tags to indicate headings, paragraphs, images, links, and other elements. So the HTML serves as the basic thing or the structure of your whole web page, right? So take it as just a structure. Now, whenever you want to design it to look nice, whatever, now you are going for CSS, right? So this HTML, they've got the basics of using what you call tags. We are going to look at it of using what we call tags to indicate the headings, whatever, the paragraphs, whatever, all those things. Also, there are these special tags like this one, the doc type, which tells the browser that this document is an HTML document so that it can treat it as or render it as an HTML document. And everything will be inside the HTML element. And then you have the head as well, which you have what you call the metadata. Metadata is just about data. So the head section, that's where you put the what you call metadata. The head, that's where you put the elements like title, meta, and some link to link the maybe external files. As well as you have also what you call the body tag. So maybe we can look at this as if I go to HTML basics, you could see that we are trying to explain this. This is what we have here, right? So this will mimic or this will be the basic HTML web page that you can have or an HTML document that you have. It will be always having these basic tags, right? This one to tell the browser that this one is it's an HTML document. Then the HTML to wrap all the HTML content, and then you'll be having the header in between here to put some metadata there. If you want to do search engine optimization, that's where you also put the metadata there. Also now you've got the board here which defines everything that will be showing on our screen, right? So everything that you are seeing here, it will be coming from this board, inside this board. So anything that you want to see on your screen, just put it inside this board element, something like that. So basically, that's the HTML. That's the HTML. So there are these basic elements that you need to know, like the headings, the paragraphs, and many more and many more elements, right? So these basic elements, I think you already have an idea of how do they work. If I go here, you see that the HTML element is everything from the start tag to the end, right? So this one, that's what you call the HTML element, something like this. It will be having the tag name here, then the content goes in between, and then you have the closing tag name, right? And also you need to know that there are some tags which you only have one tag, right? Some elements which only have one tag, like a break, which is BR, can just have whenever you want to do a line break, something like that. Or even whenever you want to put a horizontal rule, you do not need to put the opening and the closing, something like that. So there are tags, there are elements which are like that. But basically, that's how you create a what? An element. For example, uh, for example, we can have this header one, which shows the heading, which will be my first heading, something like that. So this will be the open tag, and this will be the closing tag, something like that. So basically, these are some of the HTML elements. like this one that I was talking about, the break, the BR to break a line, something like that. So there are a lot of HTML elements, right? And these HTML elements can be nested, like what we are seeing here. Can it be nested? And there's a reason for you to do that. You just not nest an HTML element just because you feel like you want to nest it. I think it's an art or a design where you'll be doing that. So there are those which are mandatory, like this HTML. It will be wrapping everything inside, which is of HTML content, something like that. And then the body will always wrapping up everything that you want it to be shown. So it's as good this body is inserted or is nested inside this HTML. So that's why we are closing this body first before closing the HTML, something like that. So when you are nesting now, you need to see or you need to know how to close these end tags, something like that. So basically, that's how you will nest those HTML elements. So basically, this is about the HTML elements. But guys, there are a lot of HTML elements to talk about. But I believe that you've gone through some of the basic HTML elements. We've been talking about the heading, the paragraphs, the BRM. We've got for bold. We've got also EM for emphasis. There are a lot of them, and we've got those that we use within our forms, something like that. So those basic elements that have been used and those that you haven't been used, that you have been using as well. So they follow this naming criteria, right? You put the name here and also the name here, but for the closing tag, you need to first put this / something like that. So basically, those are our HTML tags. And then there are these hyperlinks as well. They're very, very important to remember and to know. The hyperlinks, you can use them whenever you want to put a link or a URL. So we call it an anchor tag, right? This one. That's how you can put a link whenever I say click this link to go somewhere, whatever, to go to this, and it will be having this attribute. These ones we call them attributes, and these attributes sometimes you put the URL, not sometimes, but you put the URL where you want the user to go after clicking that link text, something like that. So that's the anchor tag. So you need to know what is this anchor tag and how is it actually used. So before looking at list and images, also images is some of the HTML elements, and also the list also forms some of the HTML elements. So before looking at these things, maybe there's something which is very, very important, which is the attribute. Maybe if we can talk a little bit about this, it will help us whenever you want to talk about any other thing later. So the HTML attributes provide additional information about HTML elements. It's as good as they describe the HTML elements, or you can use those attributes maybe to pick the HTML element, something like that. So all HTML elements can have attributes. And attributes provide additional information about HTML elements, and attributes are always specified in the starter tag. You need to know that whenever you want to put an attribute to an HTML element, you cannot do so in the end tag. You need to put it in the start tag, the first one. So attributes usually also come in a name value pairs. Normally, you put the name, you put the value of that attribute, right? So for example, here we have the anchor tag with the attribute href, which is the hypertext reference. This one, the href, and then the value will be this link that you are putting here, right? So normally the name itself also, you can have an attribute as a name, and then you can give it a value whenever maybe you want to name this anchor tag, which will be linking you to W3 school, something like that. So for example, we've got this image here, if you look at it, it have got an attribute src for source, which refers to the source where you will get this image. I saw in your assignments, some of you would fail to put the URL that would show the image or your image, something like that. So basically, this will be the attribute and its value, the attribute name and its value, something like that. So maybe the more you code, the more you see a lot of what? A lot of attributes. You can have width and the value here, height and the value here. So width is an attribute that you can use to design the width or to give the width of the image in terms of pixels. And this one also, you can give the height there in terms of pixels, something like that. So you can have also the alternate, the out attribute or the alternative for the image, in the sense that if the image is not there, it can display that this image is about a girl with a jacket, something like that. So this one is an alternative text that can be shown whenever the image is not found for whatever reason, something like that. So basically, this is all about attributes. You can have many attributes at a specific element, at a specific HTML element. So it's now about how you code. The more you code, the more you see all these attributes, right? So basically, that's what I have there. And then now let's look at the list. On the images, we've been looking at this. Maybe now let's look at the list. Why list? I think this one is also a special a special elements that you need to know, specifically if you are going to do some menu, something like that. You know, every website needs a menu, and on a device, sometimes the nav menu, you use a lot of these list, you know. So you need to know them. What is this list? How can you create a list, an ordered list, an ordered list? Also a description list, but don't worry about the description list. Maybe the first two are the ones that we need to look at, the ordered list and the unordered list. For the image, we've already done that. So let's look at the first demo there that we have, which is demo 1. So I've done some pre-coded code so that it will be easier for us it will be faster for us to follow. Okay, so basically we have what you call an ordered list, and the ordered list we use the OL, this one, the OL tag, and then inside it you put the items that you want to list. Inside it you put the item that you want to list. So this one will be a list item, this one will be a list item, and this one will be a list item, something like that. And if you run this, you could see that because it's an ordered list, it must have some order there, maybe 1, 2, 3, something like that. That's the ordered list that you want, that you are talking about, right? If you want to change it to maybe Roman numerals, whatever, there are classes that you can use to change this, especially with the CSS. You can change that as well to match whatever base criteria that you want to use for that ordered list. So let me show you how you can run this. So if I say HTTP localhost demos here and run this, I'm getting nothing here for one good reason. Maybe to just test you, why am I getting just a blank thing here when I say localhost, then demos, then I'm getting a blank HTML document or whatever. I'm just getting a blank screen here. Why is it I'm getting that blank screen there? Why that? Someone to respond? Yes, Ngon. Yes, Ngon, you can unmute yourself. I'm seeing a hand on you. Okay, maybe tinodaishe kayeni you can contribute.
Okay, good afternoon, sir.
Afternoon.
The reason why we are seeing a blank page is because we didn't give the report on which the project is running.
Okay, thank you for that. Okay, so maybe the other thing there, someone say, oh, okay, it's okay. So maybe you can lower your hand. Let me help you to lower your hand. Okay, so basically I'm getting a blank for one good reason. When I try to go for these demos, this URL will send me to this project demos folder, right? So if you are using a WAMP server, you'll be using the www folder inside your WAMP folder, right? So that's where will be your projects, right? So if you just say localhost, it will send you somewhere. But if you mention the exact project that you want, it will send you to this, like up I said demo, so it will send me to this folder. And what does it do? By the nature of the server, it will look for the file called index.php or index.html. So an index file is the entrance to your project, something like that. It's the home page or the entrance to your project. So it is executing this index.php. That's why I'm getting a blank. Why? Because if I come here looking for index, there's nothing inside my body. If I just put maybe a header there, you could see that I'll say this is my header, something like that. If I refresh this, you start to see this is my header. It is red there for one good reason. I think there's some CSS here doing this stylish work. Yes, this is my header, something like that. You see, so that was the good reason why it was just showing me some blank there, some blank there. So now, thank you for that. Yes, I need to specify the page there, because if you do not specify the page, it will just pick the index page. All right. So now let me pick the page that I'm supposed to pick, which is the demo1.php. It is inside this folder. So if I just slash demo1.php or just mention demo1, no need of putting PHP there. So I say demo one, and then I say enter. You could see that I have this ordered list, right? And it have got 1, 2, 3. So if you want to produce this ordered list, you need to have, this one is just a heading. This is the ordered list that you have here. You need to use this, you need to use this OL tag, right? And then you put the ordered list items. Like here, I can have maybe another H2 element. Let me say maybe second ordered list, something like that. Then you just need to wrap it around, or you nest the list items inside the OL tag, something like that. So I need to put the OL tag like this. So now for items, I need to list them as items. Maybe I will say item 1, something like that. Then I could have other items, maybe item 2. So you can have as many items as you want. So if I come here and refresh this, you could see now we have another list here with 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, something like that. So that's how you can generate a list. So if you are being asked, please write a code to generate a list like this, whatever, that's what you need to do. It's very, very simple, very, very easy, just like that. So that's how you can create the ordered list. What if you want to do an ordered list? You want to create a list, but with maybe bullets here. So it's no longer ordered by what? By number, something like that. So that's what we call an ordered list. How do you do it? Now you use the UL tag instead of using the OL. That's why you've got this UL, and then you nest everything inside, something like that is piece. So we have this. Then for rendering the image, I saw a challenge when you're trying to render some images. So I've rendered this image so that you could see how can you render this image. How to do it? Normally, you need to put the img tag. This one is a single, this element, it have got a single tag. Let me just accept someone. It have got a single tag here, right? It have got a single tag. img, you do not need to close it here. You do not need to put another maybe closing tag like img here. You do not need to do this, guys. Take note of that. And the other thing is that it have got this source, right? Or src attribute, and then the value is the name of the image here. Why? Because the image is in the same folder as my PHP file. What if it happens that it is in the next folder or it is not, something like that? So that's where you need to put the path. So here your value is the file path. It can be an absolute path, or it can be just a relative path from the folder, just going to. So if you want to put the whole path now, it's as good as I'm just taking the whole path from the local disk C, whatever, until I reach where there is this file. That's the full path. But a relative path, maybe if I can try to create a new folder here and say maybe images or img, let me just say img, and then let me take this one, drop it here. And then if I try to run this, I'm sure the image is still there. Why is it is still there? Okay, let me save this. Thinking there's a shortcut to how to refresh this. Why am I still getting this image? Yet the image is no longer in this. I don't know if it is refreshing, because the source now needs to get into this folder and open that. Let me just try to put something there. Maybe it can refresh. Okay, it's now refreshing. Let me leave this out. Now refresh this. Oh, let me see here. Let me see here what's happening here. What's the what's happening here? Why am I still able to access this image by just writing this? Sure, it was supposed to give me an error that this is not the exact path, because the path should be someone to assist. Okay, there's no. The path was supposed to be. It happens sometimes with the server not refreshing well, but the path here, I'm sure it was supposed to be then these images, and then then Nokia, something like that, where you are now moving from your folder that you are currently in. Then now I'm not getting this. Why am I not getting it? Yes, now I'm getting it. Because I mean the current, the folder is within the current, is in the current folder with the demo, whatever. You need to put one dot here, and then you go to image, you access the image, something like that. That's the correct path that you need to put. If you put two dots, something like that, you are moving back out of this folder within this file, and then you want to go into something like that. You can go and look around on these things and play around with that. But basically, that's how you can render an image. I saw some others assignment without the image there. You could see that it was supposed to be an image rendered there, but it's not there. Mostly that was the challenge. Okay, so basically, that was the demonstration on list and these images. So now maybe you can look at the issue of HTML forms. you can now look at the issue of HTML forms. How can you create a form in HTML? What could be the elements within the HTML form? And maybe how can you submit? How can you validate an HTML form? And maybe some examples on how to do that, something like that. So normally the form use this HTML tag, excuse me, form, right? And it have got what you call an attribute called action. It's one of the important attributes, and this action um, normally tells us where this form is going to be submitted. Action normally can have whatever file that you're going to use to process the PHP file, not to process your form, sorry. And then there is what we call a method, and those methods can be post, can be get. There is a reason why choosing post, and there is a reason why why you can choose the get method. You need to understand those are globals, those super globals. And then the common inputs for a form, like the text, the password, the email, the checkboxes, the radio buttons, the submit. So you need to know them. Also, you can use the label to label your HTML, your form elements, something like that, your form input elements, something like that. So basically, these are some of the HTML input type that you can have, and their attributes. Normally you put the type as an attribute. If you want to be a text input type, then you put text here, name, you put the name that you want to reference to that HTML, to that form element whenever you want to access the value of it. The placeholder is what the user sees, right, when before they fill that form, something like that, or that input box. So you can have an email type, a radio, a checkbox, even a password type, something like that. The one for numbers is so there are a lot of them. So maybe basically we need to look at before looking at form validation, let's maybe go to W3 schools, explore more about, sorry, there is this can I go around this? Okay, great. The shortcuts actually helped me. There's this thing. So whenever I try to access the page here, I'm having trouble to locate it because of that. Okay, so now let's look for forms. I'm sure I will have forms here. Okay, HTML forms. These ones are kind of a special thing. If you look at it, HTML form is used to collect user input. The user input is most often sent to a server for processing, right? So we can have this one as a simple form here with the first name and the way you are supposed to put the name, and then last name and where you are supposed to put, and then the submit button, something like that. So this tag here, element, or the form element, the HTML form element is used to create an HTML form for user input. So whenever you want to create an HTML form, you use these form tags, So anything between these tags will be regarded as the form elements, something like that. So then there is the input that we have been talking about, the input element that you can put inside a form. So the HTML input element is the most used form element for you to get the user input, right? So you can have the text, the radio, the checkbox, the submit, the button as well, the input type button as well. So basically this one was just an example of a form. This one where you could have, let me just try it here. And then you could see that this form, you've got this form here, and then the inputs, like there's something like that. So basically, that's how you can create a form. That's how you can create a form. Maybe you can we have covered the enough basics there. Maybe what now I need is the form attributes. Let's look at form attributes, input form attributes. Is this what I want? No. I wanted this action. What else? Maybe there's something that I might need. So the action, guys, we've said whenever you want to submit a form, you want to submit it to a certain PHP file so that it can handle its submission, or maybe to save the data to the database, something like that. So you need to put that name under this action, something like that. Okay, so the information that I was looking for is not here. So where can I get that information? I wanted to get the information about maybe it's somewhere about the get and uh the get and the post for HTML forms. I wanted the get and the post. So just for you to understand why get and why post. Normally for post, for post, you want to hide maybe some data there. So, okay, these HTTP methods, okay. So we want to look at get and post for submitting forms, this basic. So normally the get is used to request the data from a specified resource. And note that the query string will be something like this. You have name and a value pair, which will be sent within the URL, something like that. So normally get request can be cached, and get request remain in browser history, and get request can be bookmarked as well, and get request should never be used when dealing with the sensitive data. This is some of the things that I wanted you to also know. For one good reason, if you're going to use the get method, it means everything is going to be shown here. Also, you've seen that it can be also shown within the browser history as well. So get request, you have length restrictions as well. And the get request are only used to request the data, not to modify. And then the post method now, there's no this issue of limits on length. It's not there for the post. And also, it doesn't show your data here on the URL. So the post requests are never cached, and the post requests do not remain in the browser history, and the post request cannot be bookmarked, and the post requests have no restrictions on data length. So now maybe it's now about what do you want it, why do you want to use the get, and why do you want to use the post, or maybe when to use get and when to use the post, something like that. So normally the get method, you can use it here. It's about okay, the issue is on the back button or reload. You can use get there, but for post, data will be resubmitted, so the browser should alert the user that the data are about to be resubmitted. Yeah, normally when you're refreshing using this post, it will resubmit the data. You need to know that. Also, the issue of bookmarked, this one can be bookmarked, but this one cannot. This one can be cached, this one cannot, something like that. So basically, the issue of security is very, very important when it comes to the use of get and the post. So you need to know when you're dealing with the sensitive data, please run away from get and use the post. So basically, that's what we can call a form. Maybe I can go back to my index there. If there's something that I need, this is the header. Okay, so maybe I can have a simple form. Then action, maybe I want to have action as process. Sorry, process.php. And then there are other things to include here. The method, which type of method do I want to use, can say get like this, or you can just put post like this, or you can put it as small letters, just the same, right? All right. So if you use get, you need also to know kuti kana wakuzoite handle the back end part, you also need to accept that data using the get method. Okay, so the other thing that I want to mention before we do validation and all those things, there is the very, very important attribute here, which is the name. Sorry, the name. And then maybe here, let me just say student detail, something like that. So this name here that I've put as an attribute, we can use this one to pick out this form whenever, maybe if you want to do validation using the JavaScript, or maybe when you want to store it, or maybe you want to submit it through JavaScript, whatever, you need to give it a name and be able to pick it. Or maybe you can give it an ID, something like that, so that it can be uniquely identified, right, as that form, something like that. So these are some of the very, very important. Also, if you want to transmit some images, whatever data, I think you need to put the ink type. Yes, you need to put the ink type as well. There, this one was also part of I think if you look at when I got to I don't know what's happening here. Okay, maybe if I go back here, you could see that there is, I saw it somewhere, where you need to show that you are going to submit some image there or some data which is not just text. I'm no longer seeing it here. I don't know where was it. But basically, not input attributes. I saw it somewhere. Let me just go to form attributes. I think I saw it somewhere, and I just skipped it. Okay, also there's this, the target. If you want, when you're submitting and you want it to be handled on a blank page, right? You could see it when you're submitting some forms, for a new tab, something like that. That's where you can put that target there. That's where you can put that target there, something like that. So basically, that's that's the HTML. So there are also other this, specifically this one, the field set and the legend. This one are very, very important as well. You can go and look at them, or maybe you can look at them later. Those are some of the important form elements. There are these ones for selections. If you want to put a selection, maybe I can put this one. Let me just put this one. Whenever you want to put. So now this one will become an art when you're dealing with these forms. This one will become an art. I want you to see what I will get here. Oh, I need to go to index, right? I think I need to go to index. Yeah, you could see that here. I'm now having a selection where you could select whatever you want here as the car, whatever is it, which type of car, then you select whatever you want there, something like that. So these are some of the HTML elements that you can have. Okay, so now let's look at the validation. Whenever you want to submit this HTML element, you need to validate, right? So that you can send the data that you trust is the one that you need. Otherwise, no SQL injection is got. So you need to verify the data that the user is actually submitting. So the form validation is the process of checking that a form has been filled in correctly before it is processed. So for example, if your form has a text, as a text box for the user to type some text input, you might want your form handler to check that they have filled in some text before you deal with the rest of the form. So there are two main methods for validation or for validating form. What are these two main methods? We've got the server-side, where you can use the server-side programming language. For us, we'll be using PHP, but you can use even on Python, ASP, the CGI. There are a lot of backend or server-side programming languages, but for us, we're going to use PHP. Also, there is the client side where you normally do it using the JavaScript. So you want to do client-side validation, you can just use JavaScript, something like that. Then there is, so on the server-side validation, this one it's more secure, but it's more often trick to code. Also, sometimes it will be slow. Remember, when you want to do server-side validation, you send the data to the server, and then the server validates the data, and then it will return. If there's an error, then it will return back to your form. So imagine you are here, you are sending a request to Google, something like that. That's where the server is, right? For me now, it's on the local host, so it's on the same machine. But now it's on the Google now. So you send the data for validation, and then it will give you back something like that. So the browser doesn't have to connect to the server to validate the form in client-side validation. So the user finds out instantly if they have missed out some required fields. So if you are using the client-side validation, it's as good as user achingopedza kuti fill the information, then you can just validate. Even if not submit, you can validate before submitting. That's the client side. So it happens on the client's machine. So this is the client side form validation. We have got the PC with the web browser here. Maybe it's my PC. And then we have the server here. Maybe this one is a server on Google, or on Google servers, or on any other server, online server there. So here you send the form data to server, right? And then the server will reply, something like that. So the form validation for the client side validation, it happens here on the client side before submitting to the server. And then for the server side validation, you send the data maybe without validating it, and then the server now script here will validate the data, and then if there's any error, it will notify you that please fill in on this text box that you didn't fill, something like that. So that's the server side. So for the server side, it happens on the server. That's where you do the validation. So now you are just doing the same thing, only that here maybe you're just using JavaScript and HTML to do validation, but here maybe you are now using PHP to validate and then send back the errors here, something like that. But if there is no error, then you do whatever is supposed to be happening. If it is to save to the database, you save to the database, something like that. So basically, that's what you do. So there is this a simple form validation example that we're going to do together. And we are going to do the client-side validation together using this simple example, which says consider a simple form with one text field called your name. So you are going to have a simple form with with a text field called your name. And our validation script will ensure that the user enters their name before the form is sent to the user. So in other words, you want to make sure that this form is sent with some input before it is submitted. Take note of this. You can just use the required for HTML. It can make sure that this won't be sent without being filled, something like that. So this can be achieved by adding a JavaScript function in the head section of the HTML file, or you can append it just after the body, right? It's for JavaScript, you can put the JavaScript in the head section, or you can include JavaScript at the end of your HTML file just outside the body. So how do you create the form? So this was just an example of creating the form. The first part of the form is the form tag, right? Where you say form, then you put the form name, and then you put the method, also the action, and then the on submit, where you would call the form, the function, or the JavaScript function, something like that, that you want to be executed before we submit the form. So maybe we can create this form. Let me just remove this whole form. Let's start a new form. right? So for this form, I need to have what? I need to have the name, right? And what could be the name? It was a conduct form, conduct form. And then what else? I need to have the method. You are going to use the post. Okay. So I'm going to use post, right? And then the action here, it was just as it what? It was just a dummy.php, dummy.php. You can put whatever file that you think is the one that you want. And then I can have on submit, not on abort, but on submit. So on submit, I'm going to call, or I'm going to call a function. So I'm going to return a value from a function. So this function that we are going to call is the name was validate underscore form. All right. So you can give it any name that you want, validate form, something like that. So that's how you call the form for on submit. I think I've put the critical and the important the form form attributes that we want, right? So what does this do? So whenever you are trying to submit the form, it will call the validate form function, and then it will return either true or false, something like that, or it will return if there is an error or not, something like that. So if it returns true, it means continue with the submission and submit your form. If it returns false, it means please do not submit. There are some errors, something like that. All right, so the form is given the name as what? As conduct form. So this is so that we can reference the form by name from our JavaScript validation function. Also, the form uses the post method to send the data off to a dummy PHP page. And finally, the form tag includes an on submit attributes to call our JavaScript validation function, validate form when the send details button is clicked. Okay, so we need to have send details button which will be of type submit. So the return allows us to return the value true or false from our function to the browser, where true means carry on and send the form. Otherwise, false means do not send the form, or it prevents the form. So the form creation now, so the rest of the form prompts the user to enter input their name, and then into a form field called conduct name. So we're going to have a form field called conduct name, and also adds a send details, which will be a submit button. So I need to accept someone. Is that I can't see the slide say, I think you need to rejoin unless others are not seeing it. Otherwise, you need to rejoin. Okay, so I need to accept someone again. Okay. You were the same person. Okay, I hope your issue is now solved. Okay, so this is we are going to have this is our part of the form. We're going to have this one. Please enter your name. Can you make sure that we are always on mute? Let me just mute everyone. Okay, so we are going to have inside this form, we are going to have maybe the header here, our form, or maybe, yes, let me just say our form. You can write anything that you want. Then I'm going to have an input. It is going to be of type text, must have a name. The name will be conduct. It was what? Not conduct. It was a conduct name. Yes, conduct name. Yes. And then what else? We need to have the submit. Yes, we need to have the submit button. This one, let's have input. Sorry, input. This one is of type submit. Yes, and then we need to give it some value there, which is send details. And also we need to give it a name, send, but normally a submit button, if you click just submit. So we can give it a value of send details, so that whenever it is being rendered, it will be showing send details. So when you click it, it will just send details. I think it's always good to make sure that you are muted. On headphones, so normally anything that you do. So here you are going to see, if you click this one, it's going to submit to a PHP file, but we do not have that PHP file. That's why it is saying not found. So it is just submitting, yet I didn't put anything here. So I want to use JavaScript to validate this, so that whenever I send this one, to say, please fill in here, and then it will not allow me to submit. Okay, so how can you do that? Now you need to create the JavaScript function, which is going to be inside these tags, right? So this is the JavaScript function that you are going to get. So the first thing is to have this JavaScript the JavaScript tags, and then you have the function here, and then you have the closing script tag. So open the script tag, you put the type as JavaScript text or JavaScript. So here, that's where you need to put the JavaScript. Sorry, that's where you need to put the JavaScript tags. This one, the script tags, and then inside you nest your form, something like that. All right, so let's now have the script tags, and normally you need to give it a type as a text slash JavaScript, and then for JavaScript now it have got you need, whenever you want to create a function, you write function keyword, and then you give the name, then you put these brackets, you know what we do with a function, something like that. So what do you do there? Here you need to put the keyword function and the name of the function, which is supposed to be, I have it here, validate form, something like that, validate form, and then you put these brackets, you are going to pass nothing there, and then here you are going to declare a variable. If you want to declare variable, you can use the var there, or you can just write the name of the variable in JavaScript. There's no problem here. If you see, we've got valid is equal to true, something like that. So you can have your variable as valid is equal to true, something like that. And then the next thing is we want to check if this contact name here is empty or not. So how do you do that? You access it through document, the HTML document attribute, this one, the document. Then you put a dot operator, then you put the name of the form, right? Then after putting the name of the form, you put a dot operator, you put the name of the attribute, the name of the element, sorry, the form element, and then you put dot value to get its value, something like that. And then you compare using this double equal sign. So if it is empty, then you want to alert and set valid to false, and then return valid, something like that. So you want to say if, right? So you want to say if document dot, then you want to put the form name, which is conduct form, right? Dot, we need to put the attribute, so not attribute, but the form element, which is conduct name. Then we say dot value. If that is equal to empty string, then what do you want to do? We want to send an alert, right? And then, sorry, that alert is that please enter your name. And we need to set valid, maybe valid to false. We need to set it to false, sorry. It's false. We need to set it to false so that whenever we return, so here we are going to return valid. I think you have seen what I'm trying to achieve here. So if it is equal to an empty string, it means you didn't enter anything. So you're going to say, please enter your name, and then you put false in the valid, and then you return a valid, which means you are going to return false. So if it is not equal to empty string, what does it going to do? It is going to invalid. You are always going to have a true there, and then we return true. Then it will proceed with the submitting submitting the form. So here, if I try to do this, okay, I need to refresh this. Sorry. So if I try to say, please enter your name. So, and you see it didn't actually proceed to submit. So if I do this, so you see it will say not found. Why? Because this dummy.php, I don't have the file. So basically that's how you do the validation or the what do you call it? The user or the client side validation. That's how you do it. I don't know if I've got questions there. For the client side, for the server side, don't worry. Maybe you can look at it when you're doing something related to PHP, when you're sending a form there, and maybe I'll show you what does it mean there when you're validating it, something like that. It's very, very simple to do that. But for this one, I don't know if I've got contributions, questions. If I do not have, so allow me to proceed. So this was an explanation of the JavaScript file. I think I've explained it. Why is it like that, whatever. So basically, that's how you can do that. Maybe now we can look at the PHP. Now we can look at the PHP, which is the hypertext preprocessor language. The PHP. Basically, we need to know how do you embed your PHP inside an HTML file. If you want to have it, normally you can embed the PHP code through the use of these tags. There are other ways to do that, but this is the simple way and the best, easiest way to do it. For one good reason, it also mentioned the PHP. For others, you do not need to mention even this PHP, which will be a little bit problematic if you are using multiple languages there. So basically, that's how you are going to do it. And then for the variables, they are very case sensitive, and you start them with this dollar. Every variable in PHP starts with that dollar sign or the currency sign, this one. So basically, this is the basic of PHP. There is a lot to talk about of PHP. There are arrays in PHP, associative arrays. There are those super globals, the get, the post. In PHP, there are a lot of things to talk about, but I know you've been using them. So maybe what I can do is to wait where we might get an example, and maybe we try to explore together the PHP side of this. So basically, there is the handling form, the issue of handling form data, like the data that we are sending, we're not handling that data, right? So how do you handle that data? How do you handle that data? You can use the get and the post super globals to accept that data, and you can use is set to check for the existence of the data before maybe trying to get the value, something like that. And then after that, maybe you can also sanitize or filter input. There are a lot of things that you can do. And then for sanitizing here, you scrape out maybe some HTML, whatever, if you need to re-render it properly, whatever, something like that, you can use HTML special characters, this one to sanitize, so that whenever it is displaying, it will render the HTML very well. If you want to re-render that data, you can go and look around it. So basically, these are the things that you need when you handle a form submission. Maybe you can try it with this form that we have before look at some specific examples that we can have. Let's have the dummy. It was supposed to be what? Dummy.php, dummy.php, something like that. And we need to have PHP, All right, this is where we are going to put our PHP code inside this. Can you make sure that we are on mute? Yes, I'm wearing headphones, so any slight noise will disturb me. Any slight, I was talking about, okay. So basically here, I can have maybe a variable. The best way to do it, we were using post. I think we're using post. So there are these super global variables, some sort of like an array. So here I need to put the name of something that I need to access, right? So I want to access this field. It's this one. I use the name of this input field. I want to access this, right? And I just want to echo out the variable name just like that. So I want to get the name and echo it out. So here, if I do this, you see, I'm getting the name here, something like that. So how have I managed to grab the input and display it? I grab it using this super global. I'm submitting use the post method. So here I will target post and I put the name of the field that I want to get the details of that field, and then I put it here. Then boom, I've echoed it out, something like that. So there's a lot of things that you can do. Here I've used this because I have this option here, which is validating. Let me just remove this, and you see why server side is also important. Also, I wanted to, okay, I want to move back to this. If I send this, I just got nothing. I think it was supposed to, I'm trying to access something which is not set or what. It was supposed to give me some kind of maybe an error that this one is not set because you're accessing the field which is not set, but for some reason, it's actually processing this. Let me see. Because this one is not, okay, maybe I can try to do this. Okay, and now I'm seeing where the issue is. All right, let me do this. Yeah, now I've seen. So here it's undefined array key, contact name, this one. For one good reason, it's because when I'm trying to do it through the dummy.php, it is executing this one, but it's not what, it's not set, right? So if you do your validation on this side here, you do not get this default error, but you could say whatever you want to say to the client. There's something like that. Okay, so I can come here, maybe return my validation there, but yes, I can return my validation there. Then here, what I need to do is I need to check if this one is a set first, and then it do something like that, right? So I need to check if this one is set, right? If is set, I think it's this function. If $post is set, whatever, something like this, then sorry, I need to take this one now. So here I want to put it here. Okay, something like this. So here, for one good reason, let's declare so that it won't be okay, it won't be a local variable and then here. So what it means is if I try now to do this, I'm not going to get that error, right? So it is going to check, is this set? If it is not set, it's just going to echo out this empty string, something like that. So basically, that's how you can do the backend validation. So the best way to do it, you do not target this one. You target the button to be submitted. If it is set or if it is clicked, then you know that most of my HTML elements, my form elements, we have data because the front end have actually done the, what do you call, the validation, something like that. They've done the validation. So you do not need to target this contact name. What you need to target is this send, right? You need to target the send here. That's what you need to target, this send, and then you are good to go, something like that. So basically, that's how you handle the form, but also there is the need of sending to the database as well. So how do you connect to MySQL? With MySQL, how do you do that? Normally, you can use this MySQL to connect to your database. You pass the root to your database, which is mostly local host if you are on your machine, and then the user and the password and maybe the name of the database, right? And then if there are errors, you can check using if, then the connection variable that you have used, and then if it returns some connect error there, then you could die, and then, or you could just print out and stop the connection and print out the error, something like that, to the database. So you also need to be able to write prepared statements to prevent SQL injection, mostly when you want to write when you want to store to some data to your database. And then you can insert the data. After prepare, you bind, and then you bind parameters with the prepare statement, and then you execute, something like that. So this is the other thing that we need to actually look at. So maybe this one, don't worry, I think we need to look at this basic example that we have, a very, very important example, which is a form that we have that have got the legend, personal information, and first name. So normally this one we use it, it's a legend, we use it basically when you want to group together related fields, something like that. So personal information, first name, Mike. Okay, this one is the information that you're going to put, last name, the information that you're going to put, and then the submit button. Okay, so what could be the questions here? The question is saying, assuming that clicking the submit button would send the information, the form details to script code process.php, they are saying just assume there is a process.php file which is ready to process the data after you click the submit. So in other words, you're being told that your form is going to have an action as process.php. So write HTML that would display the form shown above, indent your tags so that it's clear which tags are appearing. So we need to see that first name and its input needs to be maybe closer, whatever, so that we could see that this is where you're supposed to write the first name. This is the last name. This is where you're supposed to write the last name, and then the submit button. So your work first is to work for the 10 marks, and then how, by designing this form, maybe as it is. And then the second thing is to write the code for process.php. If this script gets from data above and persist it to a MySQL database called MySQL database table called student. So in other words, kuti kana munhu akaclicka submit, send the whole data to MySQL database, and you need to ask to assume. Why? Because in the exam you are not going to create the database. You are just saying assume that. Please, let's make sure that we are on mute. Someone is saying trying rejoining. Okay, so we are going to assume kuti kune database runs exam.db. So what I'm going to do when I'm experimenting here, I'm going to create the database, but you are not going to create the database. So table schema, if you're in an exam, so the table here is going to be having an ID as the ID, as the unique ID, and then the first name and the last name. So also NB, it means the database has a single table called student with ID as primary key and first and last name fields, something like that. So our work is to design this first, and then the next work is to write the process.php file and write a code that could save the data to this database, that exam.db, and to this table student, something like that. So let's look at this. We are going to open the demo2 code. I've done this before so that we could save us some time. So I need to look for the demo2. Yes, I need to look for the demo2. So guys, here I have got this simple form that I have here. If you look at it, it's a very, very simple form. We have the form element here, the form tag, sort of the opening tag for form. Action is process.php. We are answering this part that there is process.php, the script which is going to handle that. And the method, we are just going to use post. And then we are going to have the field set, and we are going to have this legend part. We're going to have this legend. This legend personal information is the one which is going to be displayed. Maybe if I can go to, instead of this, let me go to demo 2, right? You see, I have this personal information and everything right around this border, something like that. So this is the legend that I was talking about. You are grouping it inside this, and then I've got the first name paired, the last name paired with this, and then the submit button, something like that. So that's what we have. All right. So let's look at, so we've got this label, right? Label, this label. Normally use labels when you want to pair the label with the input, right? With the input. So if I remove this, maybe you could see what I'm talking about. If I remove this, sorry, all right, let me just remove this. If I remove this, yes, it can work. It can work. You could see there will be no changes here. It can work. For one good reason, what you've write here, it will ignore all the white spaces, whatever. But this is the best way to do it, so that this label, normally the HTML itself, it will treat that, and it is also good for search engine optimization for those who are going to develop websites. Okay, so this one is going to be required. So you are going to use the required so that it won't submit until you put all the values, something like that. It will ask for the values. And then we are going to put a break after this so that we jump a line here, so that we skip a line to go down there. That's why I've got this break. And then after that, we also have the last name field with ID last name, and the name is last name as well. This one, you can even leave it. There's no problem. I don't think we are going to use the ID, but we can also use it to uniquely identify this input. And after this, we can have the submit button here, the type with the type submit, and then something like that. Then you are good with this form. All right. So this is what you are required to do for writing the HTML to display that form. This is what you are required to do. As simple as this, then you are good to go. Of course, yes, we need these also these tags, we need them, this one, because that makes up the basic HTML. So now when you click submit, we need to send this data to a file called process.php. So this one is now about the second part of the question, which says do this. All right, write code for process.php. I think I have that file process.php, this one. So this is the code that you are supposed to write. The first thing is you need to connect your database. Guys, take note that my database user is root and my password is root. So you have my details for my database. If you got my machine, you can simply log into my database. So some of you sometimes doesn't have a password. When you install Zambo or Wambo, it comes with an empty password, something like that. So sometimes you are not required to put the password here normally on localhost, but mine, it have got a password root. That's why I have root. I'm saying so that those who are going to try this code, you won't get some errors, right? On why. So the database name is going to be exam.db. Like here, I'm taking it from this. We have got the database name is exam.db. The table will be student. That's the table that we're going to access, right? So it's as good as if I come here, maybe I need to go to localhost. All right, I need to log in here. Sorry, yes. Then let me drop this database exam.db, but I think you know how to create this. I don't think there's anyone with a problem with this. Maybe I can just drop this drop database. I think it's drop database. Then I'll put the database name. It's exam DB, something like that. I think that's it. Try to drop this database. Okay, so I'm going to create a new database called exam DB create, and then I'm going to create a table called the student with about 3 columns, right? Create, and then this table is going to have ID, and it's going to be a primary key. So let me say auto increment. This one's an integer. I'm going to have a first name, I think, and the last name. And this one are var characters. Yes, they're going to be var characters, as you've seen. So I'm creating the database. No need of putting the size there. I think that's only what we need there. Please enter the length. Okay. So let's put the length as maybe 50 characters, a total of 50 characters for first name and last name. And then we could save this. So done. I've created the database. There's nothing here. So we need to send the first name and the last name. The ID will be automatically created, something like that. So that's how you create a database. You've done this. Sneaky, you want to say something? You can ask. You can unmute yourself and ask.
Okay, so I have a question on creation of a form, the one that you have been displaying earlier.
Okay.
You put an input inside a label. Is it okay if I can create a label, then close a label, and then put an input type?
There's no problem. There's no problem again. There's no problem on that. You can do that as well.
Okay, it's fine.
It can work. It only goes to identify the HTML, the input element with that name, something like that. Munashi, you want to say something?
Yes, I wanted to ask, let's say I've been asked in an exam, and the question is saying create a database. So how am I supposed to show that I've created a database in the exam?
If you are being asked to create, let me just Well, let me just mute you so that I would respond. I don't know to noise. All right. If you are being asked to create a database in exam, you know what you have been doing. You have done the module, a database. Might create a database in exam. How do you do that? Use SQL statements. In the Shandisa interface to create. Like what have I done when I dropped that database? I used the drop database, then I've put the database name, something like that. So that's what you do. If you want to create a database, create database, then you put exam DB as the name of the database, and then creating a table, use create table command, something like that. And then to insert data, use insert, something like that. So it's as good as if you're going to be asked to create a database, that's how you create the database. You write the SQL command, and then boom, the database is created. I hope you are answered there. So
yes, I'm answered. I just
okay.
wanted to know if we are required to.
Okay. So maybe now we need to look at, okay, now I've created the database. So the question was saying, assume the database is there. So in other words, on this question, you are not going to do the hassle of creating the database, because the question was saying, this one to Gigi called this one Gigi. So it means the database. No, the question was saying, assume the click auto to went to, there was a, okay, yeah, it's saying assume the following: database name examdb and table schema, this one, are already there in the database. So you just assume that there is a database called examdb and it's there. So you do not need to go the process that I've done of creating the database. But because I want to demonstrate that you can connect this form to this database and insert the data, I need to have that database running. Otherwise, I will just get errors and you could not see something like that. So you need to take note of that. So basically, I have my form set up, and then on this code, now you use the MySQL to connect to database, this function. So you declare variable, this variable, and you give it the name con. For connection, you can give it any name that you want, but this one is the best name to give since it's our connection that we are going to create. So this function will create a new connection to your database and use that connection to send data, to retrieve data from the database, something like that. So how do you do that? You use MySQL function, MySQL function, and that function will take the host as the first input, which will be the URL or the host server, something like that. Because this machine is a local, the server is on the local machine, you use the local host keyword or the 127.0.0.1 IP address. I think that's the one for local host, whatever you find out what's that IP address that you can put. And then here you put the database user, right? And then here you can put the password, and here you can put the database name. So you can write all these things directly here, but it's good to just declare variables, and then here you just pass variables here. Okay, and then the next thing is to test if this connection, so this was going to create a connection, but in case it failed, you need to actually return that connection failed and display the error, something like that. This is very, very important so that it will stop to to do everything, all these things, something like that. So in case the connection is good, it have connected. So what we are going to do is to prepare and bind our parameters, or is to going to create the SQL statement to send the data to the database, right? So the SQL statement to insert data into a table, you use the insert keyword into, so it's insert into, you put the table name, which is going to be student, and then you are going to put the first name and the last name here as our columns that we're going to target. The ID column, we're going to leave it white because it is going to be auto-incremented, something like that, auto-generated. And also for one good reason, if you look at your form here, you do not have anything related to ID. So it's either it is being created here on the background, or it is just being automatically created by the database. So if you want to create it automatically, maybe you can write a code here where you could create maybe my idea, my students, auto-generate them, something like that. And then values, you put these placeholders, and then these placeholders that we have put here are the ones that you are going to replace with the actual data and send the statement. So the next thing is to prepare the statement. So connection, prepare this SQL statement. So you've prepared that SQL statement, and here you've sent that, not sent, but you've prepared the statement. So here, if it failed to prepare that statement, then you need to send the error. And then the next thing is to sanitize and bind, or to just take the input from the user and bind it to this SQL statement that we have prepared, right? So here you take the first name using the post global array, like what I've done before in the dummy here, something like this. So that's what we are doing. So we are taking this first name straight into first name. So you can even remove this. There's no problem. The sanitization part, if you think it is making it harder for you, you can just remove it. There's no problem. This one, it will still work. You can remove this one. So if you remove this, you do it this way. You remove this one. Also, you remove this closing bracket. That's how. I removed this $sign, something like that. It's supposed to be there. So that's how you can remove that. It can still work. So we are going to take the first name. This first name is going to come from this first name. So it is going to pick an attribute, sorry, not an attribute, but an HTML or a form element with the name first name. So it is going to take the value of this field, and then it will store it into first name, into first, and then this one will go to last. And then you bind the parameters, because there are strings, you use SS there. And then this first to be paired with this placeholder, this last to be paired with this placeholder. So it is going to store this, like it is going to match here and match here. And you use the execute code, the execute function, to execute the statement. We have built the statement, bind the parameters, then you use execute. So if the student registered both, if you say if this one returns true or false, so if it executed without errors, it will turn true. So it is going to run this one. Otherwise, it is going to print the error, something like that. And then you close the statement and your connection as well. That's the last thing to do. So basically, this is what you are required to do. You can test this and see if it is working. Let me just put here. Then let me just submit this. You see the student successfully registered. Go to the database, browse this or refresh this. You see that I'm seeing this student being registered here. So basically, that's how you can answer such questions. I don't know if I've got questions on this one. Otherwise, I could move on to the issue of CSS, and then maybe we need to look at ways of including this, whatever. Do I have any question, contribution? Otherwise, let me just move on to the issue of CSS. I hope I do not have it. So on the CSS, what we need to talk about mostly is why do we need CSS and how to include CSS, and maybe run the CSS, something like that. So basically, we need the CSS to design a website so that it will look nice. And then you need CSS. So that's when the CSS come into play, right? So normally the syntax is very, very simple. You're having the selector, and then you put this open brackets, and then you put the property, full colon, the value, and the terminate, something like that. Where the selector is going to be maybe the name of the attribute, or maybe the tag name of that attribute, or maybe the ID of the attribute, or maybe the class name of that attribute, not of attribute, but of that element, so of that HTML element. That's what you can use as your selector here. So the type of selector here, if you look at it, you can have H1, which is the HTML tag name, or you can have the P as paragraph, or you can use the class selector where you can say dot class name, right? If you want to design, maybe let me just come here. Okay, so here. Maybe I can go to index, right? So if you look at it, maybe you want to design these both to have maybe same color or whatever, something like that. You can give them a same class name, something like that. If you say class here, and maybe you give them the same class name. So any design that you are going to put here, maybe I can also put a class here. So maybe if I say the class here, maybe let me just say design, but normally you give it a related class, whatever the name, which is. So if I'm going to go to CSS and target this class and put some design for this class, that CSS is going to affect these two HTML elements, something like that. So you will be saying dot design as a selector here. But if you use the HTML tag here, you'll be writing the exact tag here. You can design all the input which are on this document by just saying input instead of this. So you say input and then you design something like that. Then the ID selector, if you're using an ID to select the ID name, so you just say hash, then you put the ID name, and then you write whatever you want to do here. Then there is the descendant and the child selectors as well. We're not going to dive into this much deep. And then there are rules now, or ways of including CSS to your HTML document. This is very, very important part. You need to understand, you need to know them. There is the inline where you can just design the HTML element, like each and every element. So inorwadza manje because you'll be designing each and every HTML element, something like that. It's as good as if you want to design this one, you put its own style in here by just using the keyword style, something like that. You just put a style here, and you start to style it, maybe color, maybe let me say red, and then what if I want both of them to be red, something like that. So if I go to the index, you could see here, let me go to the index. If I do this, oh sorry, because this one there is no placeholder, or what if I put a placeholder and let me just say test. Oh, maybe I need to target if it was a, how do you call, maybe if it was a header, maybe if I did this on a header, and you need to do it on this, yeah, maybe if I do this on a header which says our form, something like, you see the colors change to red. What if I also need to style this? You need again to go on that HTML element which is here and put the same style. So if you look at it, it's a lot of work if you have got a million, thousands of these HTML elements. So this is bad for search engine optimization. This is also bad in the sense that it gives you a lot of work. So you can only use it whenever you have a precise CSS that you only want to affect that only tag. Then that's where this one now came into play. So we call it inline CSS. It's inline CSS, something like that. That's the inline styling. So you can go and play around with it, something like that. And then there is the internal style. The internal is a way of including the CSS, where you could use the style tags inside the head section. Yes, not on your auto style, then auto my tag, open and closing tag. And then not go to CSS yako like never before. But it have got also some good and some disadvantages as well. So sometimes I think you need to understand why you're doing that. Maybe I need to take this code just to hold a little bit. So I was saying for this style that you can put inside the head section, it have got its own good and bad. Why, guys, is it bad to have this? Yeah, we have this one style here inside the head section. And then now you can target, maybe I can target the H1 tag. Sorry. Then here, maybe I can say the basic one is label. Let me just say color red, something like this. Yes, there will be no error there. If I refresh this one, you're not going to see any difference there for one good reason. I've targeted the hashtag, which means every element with H1 tag, so it's going to be not hashtag, but H1 tag is going to be have a color red, something like that. So it's now a little bit better than the inline style. But why is it good or bad, guys? Let's just discuss this. You have done this before. I know you have done this when you were doing your assignments. Maybe someone to tell me why is it the internal style sheets are good and why they are also bad. Someone to try. You've seen that I've managed to actually handle the entire H1 tags. Yes. Tinodaishe, you can unmute yourself and try to contribute.
Okay, I think it's good because maybe you would like to implement the same style of CSS across different pages. So you have to be doing in each and every page instead of just moving it outside and implement it in many pages.
Okay, thank you for that. Thank you for that. That's the very, very correct analysis that you have made there. If you want, maybe, you know, as a website, it will have a lot of pages, right? So maybe there is the style that you want to be the same on all the pages. It means you need to repeat this in every head section of that page. So that's the bad part about it. But it is also good in the sense that you can also target maybe all the elements at once inside that page. Like here, it can target all the H1 elements inside this page. So it have got its advantage and its disadvantage. So we are doing CSS because we want to customize and make our website look nice. At the same time, we want to separate the content, the HTML content, and the CSS. Why? Because CSS is not okura zvekudaro. So for search engine optimization, it is always good to make sure that CSS will be a standalone file, right? So with those basics, it is not good to put this here but it also have its own advantages of why doing that, something like that. So basically, that's the other way of including CSS to your project, right? So we have got this one again, the external, which is this one, the external, where you need to put link, then you put the relative, the relationship, the real REL, it's a relationship. Then you mention that this one is a style sheet, and then you put the hypertext reference, which is going to be your URL to locate the file, which is going to be so you give the name here with an extension .css, something like that. So you do that instead of putting styles here. Now you put the what? This link here. It is going to be a style sheet that I'm linking here, and then the name is going to be style.css. So again, guys, what we've done with the images, they also applies here. This one's a URL. So styles is in the same folder as this index, right? This one. So you do not need to play around. You just need to write this straight, something like that. Otherwise, if you are going to have this one in another folder, then it's your own fish to fry there. You need to know how to do there. Sometimes it is very, very good to separate this from raw HTML. So you have a CSS folder that have to do with some styles there. So you need to be able to visit it by playing around with your URL here, like what we've done there. So now, if there are styles in the style.css, there is nothing there. If there was something, okay, so this one was targeting the H, this one, and this one. Why is it not working? Why this one is not working? It was supposed to style every H tag with color ready, and maybe the text alignment left and the font size of this. Okay, maybe this one needs it to be terminated there. I think that's the. So the other thing, I think if we do this, it will be easier to spot some of these errors. Let me try to, oh, it's not styling my document. I think it's the issue of refreshing, whatever, not refreshing, that it was supposed to work. Since I do not have the internal, let me try to check out maybe these things, and then let me see if it is going to, it's not working. Maybe it's, but inside the index, do I have any style? Do I have any style targeting the H1? No, I do not have. So basically, I think it's it should work. It should work. That way it should work. Maybe we need to look at the import within the CSS files again. Sometimes if you are in the CSS file and you want to have some code from another CSS file, you can just use it at import, and then in brackets, you pass the name or the URL of the file. What it does, it imports that CSS file into your new CSS file, and then you add some other CSS that you want to do. So please go and try to read on this and apply this and see how you can do that. It's very, very important. It's very, very important. Maybe we need to look at the next thing to save time. These are some of the content, padding, border, margin, whatever. These are some of the attributes that you can use for CSS. You can do, we have got the display properties where you can display as a block, inline block, whatever. None. These are the things that you have been using when you were designing, when you're doing your assignments. I'm not going to look at it. For positioning, again, you can have a static, relative, absolute, or a fixed position. Also, you can also design, this one was just an example. So there's this exercise that you need to look at and do. Yes, there's this exercise. I'm thinking that we can try it, but also I think I'm tired. Maybe I can try this one. Let me just try this one. For one good reason. Vamwe tatokanganwa ma-quadratic formulas. So this one which says consider the following request string http maths.solve/solution.php. A is equal to 1 and B is equal to 4 and C is equal to 4. It means they are using the get. And I think for that one we can agree. Why? Because we have said the get method, when you're submitting a form or sending a request using get, it will show the values of your attributes. So it is the values of your elements. So it is saying there's an element called A with value 1 and another element called B with the value 4 and another element called C with a value 4, something like that. And then it is saying if A, B, and C are coefficients of a quadratic equation, whose solution is this, minus B plus or minus the square root of B squared minus 4AC over 2A. So write down code for solution.php. Why solution.php? Because this one is being sent to solution.php to solve the quadratic equations. So if you look at it, guys, we are sending A, B, and C. So when you're doing the code, you need also to have A, B, and C. Excuse me, where you'll be receiving it through the get. Excuse me, through the get super global. That's what we have done. So we've done the post. We didn't do the get. So maybe we need to just run through this quadratic formula and understand it. And then maybe we could try to come up with the code. Right, so let me run you through this one. I think I have something that I've done here. I've looked at this. I think it's a good way to learn quadratic formulas, to learn about quadratic equations. We have done this in O level, so I'm not going to go into detail. So guys, a quadratic equation is an equation that have got the highest power of x is 2 there, right? That's the quadratic formula there. So if you look at it, so it will be in form of ax plus 3x plus b x plus c, something like that is equal to 0. That could be the standard form. This one, that could be the standard form. So the coefficient of x squared will be your a, and the coefficient of x will be your b, and the coefficient of c, and then c, it will be a constant c, something like that. So this would be the quadratic equation with equal to 0 there. So if you are given something like this, it means 2x squared. So it means your a will be equal to 2, and your b will be equal to 5, and your c will be equal to 3, something like that. So these are the basics of quadratic formula, how to find some solutions. You can use my graphs, whatever, all those things, but that's not my area of interest. But now let's look at the issue of how to solve them. Normally, we look for what you call my solutions or what you call my roots when that equation is equal to 0, right? So normally we use this formula. You can solve by factorization or you can use this formula, right? Banana cascade to factorize. So normally you are going to solve using this formula, right? So maybe if you understand the basics of this formula, it will be easier for us to write the code, right? So if you look at it, first of all, what is the plus or minus this one that we have, which will be here? So normally the plus or minus, it tells us that we need to have two answers. The one where you are adding minus b plus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. And the other one, which will be minus b minus square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a, something like that. So I need to accept someone. So that's the plus or minus. So we are going to work two solutions, why we are using plus and why we are using minus. And then there is the other thing that you need to look at, the issue of discriminant. So if you're using a graph, you can just pick wherever it is crossing this zero. But what if your graph is not crossing a zero, but you still need the answer? So that's where you need to use the concept of this discriminant, which is this b squared minus 4ac that we have, which is that's when you need to know that whenever b squared minus 4ac is positive, then we get our answer as two real solutions. Two real solutions, true one solutions, and other number chat. And then when it is equal to 0, we get one real solution. It means we get what we call a repeated root. When b squared minus 4ac is equal to 0, it means our answer is going to be a repeated root, which means maybe our answer it will be just 4 as a repeated root. And then when it is negative, we get a pair of complex numbers. You know, you've done complex numbers where you have the imaginary number, a real part, and an imaginary number. For those who went on to do mathematics at A level, you know what we are talking about is a complex number. So if it is a complex number, you could get something like this, minus 2 plus or minus 4i all over 10, where I is equal to something like minus 1, something like that. Yes, minus 1. I will be an imaginary number, which is the square. So the square root of minus 1. What happens is whenever you got b squared minus 4ac as a negative number, you cannot find a square root of a negative number, something like that. So it will be expressed as a complex number, as an imaginary number, something like that. So for this one, instead of say minus 2 plus square root of minus 16 over 10, yes, you do that for the first solution. Then for the second solution, it will be minus 2 minus the square root of this one over 10. So those will be your two solutions. So the answer could be this one, x is equals to minus 0,2 plus or minus 0,4. Why? Because they just divided this one with this one for the first solution. So if you just divide this by this one, it's all over this, but you divide the real numbers, these real numbers only. And this, not only you divide this and divide this by 10, then you get this, something like that. So basically, you've seen how a quadratic formula works. And the key thing to look at is this one, when it is positive, when it is negative, and when it is equal to 7. Then boom, we are good to go. So for this one, we're supposed to answer this one. I think I have it somewhere, demo, grid. Okay, it was supposed to be solution, right? Said write down code for solution.php. Yes. So first thing first, retrieve and cast parameters to this one. For this one, you can leave. This one was to check if A, B, C have got a value. If it doesn't have a value, let's just put some 0 or something like that. So you can even take out all this. There's no problem. It was checking, is this set? If it is set, yes, then we take the value of A and then we put in A. If it is not, we could just put 0 onto that, and then it will be assigned to A, something like that. So I'm saying you can even just take out this. There's no problem. It is going to check. If it is set, it is going to proceed to take this, and then put. If it is not, it is going to put a 0 into A, something like that. So it is going to check, is it get $A set? If it is set, then it will take the value as a float number, and then it will store in that. But if it is not set, it is just going to put a 0 in A, something like that. So I'm saying for it to be easier for you, you can take out this and take out this and just left with this one where you just get your value and store it in A, something like that. So you're getting A, B, and C and store in these variables. What's the next thing? remember the very, very simple thing. A cannot be equal to 0 for one good reason. If A is equal to 0, it means you are dividing by 0. Which means you cannot divide by 0. So the first thing is to check if A is equal to 0, work out coefficient of A must not be 0. Then you exit, which means you are not going to run everything down there. So that's what you need to check first. So the next thing is to compute the discriminant. Why computing the discriminant? We need to see, is it positive? So we need to see if it is positive or negative, something like that. We need to see if it is positive or equal to 0 or negative, so that we prepare ourselves to find the solution of real numbers, or to find one repeated solution, or to find a complex number, something like that, some complex number. So how do you find the discriminant? It's b squared, which is b times b, minus 4ac, which is minus 4 times a times c. The next thing is to compute the roots. How do you do that? First, check if the discriminant is greater than 0, which means discriminant can be positive. That's where you could have two real roots. So how do you do that? You find the square root of the discriminant. That's the first thing to do. If you go to our formula here, you want to find the square root of this b squared minus 4ac. Then you add it to this one and then divide by 2a, something like that. So you find the square root of this b squared minus 4ac. Then after having the square root, then we say minus b plus the square root of our discriminant. That's what we need to do here. You add this minus b plus this, then you divide everything by 2a. That's why we have this one in the brackets, and then divide by this. And then for the second root, you say minus b minus, now we are putting a minus here, and then you echo out the root. So root for x1 and root for x2 is equal to, then you put the value here of x1, which is this variable, and the value for x2, and then it will show, and then this break is to skip a line after. So that's this one. It's a way of adding HTML to your PHP file. Again, you can do this, right, as a string there, then you can have it rendered, display as HTML, something like that. Then the other thing is to look when your discriminant is equal to 0, when you have one real root. So when your discriminant is equal to 0, it is as good as here, it's a 0 here. So square root of 0 here, we have nothing. So it's as good as minus b divided by 2a. So whenever I say minus b plus or minus 0 here, you are just going to get the same value. That's why we just have one repeated root, something like that. So it's as good as you are just going to say minus b divided by 2a, and then you report that as a repeated root. The next thing is when you have your discriminant is less than 0. So that's the last thing to check, which is the else part. That's where you're going to have the complex roots or the imaginary numbers, whatever. So what do you do there? You find the square root of a negative number, which is the negative discriminant there, because it is negative. That's why you put that. And then we store the value there as a square root of that discriminant. Then what to do next? The next thing is so the next thing is to have minus b divided by 2a. Why? Because you want to find the real part. It is going to be real part plus imaginary number. And then the next thing is to find the imaginary part. The imaginary part is to take the square root of the discriminant, which is this one, the square root of this one, then divided by 2a. Because this one is negative, it will give us the imaginary value. If you use the square root of negative, it will give you an imaginary value. So we divide that imaginary value by 2a, something like that. And then we have two roots of adding the real part to imaginary as well as subtracting the imaginary from real part, something like that. So this will be the final part. And then I can test it and see the result. So how can I do that? To run this, I think I need to take this one, solution.php / what, blah, blah, blah. I thought, okay, here, /solution. Okay, I've done it before. Okay. So I've put when A is 5, B is 2, and C is 1, and then it is giving me that these are, oh, this one was an example from this slide. All right, this one, I think this one. Yes, this one, which was minus 0.2 plus or minus 0.4i. I think that's what we are getting here. Minus 0.2 plus 0.4i, and this one. Why? Because I take A as 5, B as 2, C as 1. If you go to here, you could see what's your A is 5 to 1, right? But if you put the ones from the slide, was supposed to be 1, 4, 4. If you put, sorry, 1, then 4, then 4, it's going to give me a repeated root of -2 as my answer. So the solution for that equation, so it will be a solution for equation yakanzi x squared plus b plus 4x plus 4. Yes, that's the is equal to 0. That's the equation that we were solving. I think it's x squared plus 4x or plus 4x, then plus 4 is equal to 0. This is the equation that we are solving. So maybe you can try it. If you put -2 squared is going to be 4, right? Yes, then this one is minus 4x. So it will be 4. So this one is a plus 4x. So it will be plus 4 times -2, which is going to be -8. Then plus 4. So if you get 4 plus -8, you're going to get -4. Then -4 plus 4 is going to be a 0, which is correct. So it is working very well, very correctly. So if you look at it, this is how you can answer such question. And then explain 4 ways of adding cascading style sheets. That's what we're doing here. These are the 4 ways of adding cascading style sheets to your HTML documents. And then there is this part. I just feel like I can't do this anymore. Write HTML to display the table below without using the table. So you have this table. So you're saying do it, but do not use the table like the th, the table tags, the th tags, or the table rows, or the table data, but a TPS that use a div and any CSS. So you can create this layout of web. How you can have maybe some divs, and then a CSS. It's doable. If you're going to use the div and direct CSS, then you need to design your rows and columns, and then you have the CSS that you can use to design this. Or you can also simply use the grid from the CSS, and you can have this output, something like that. You can have this output. I think I have some that I've done before, but I'm feeling that in picture. But I think if I run this, I'm sure it can give us, if I go for grid, I say grid, yes, you see I'm having this grid just the same as, yes, I've got the header, the navigation, the content, the sidebar, and the footer here down here. I'm just using the HTML and the CSS. It's very, very simple. The code is very, very simple, very, very short. Maybe if you look at it, I'm going to have a div, right, with the class of as the grid container. So this one is going to be my grid container. So I'm going to use the grid layout. If you go to CSS research about grid layout, you could see. So I'm going to use the grid layout. And then inside this grid layout, I'm going to have these divs, and these divs, I'm going to assign them the classes where header, this one's for navigation, content, sidebar, footer. And then after that, I'm going to now design this grid to look like this using CSS. So I need to just allow someone to join. So basically, how do you do that? Which means first thing is the grid container there. So yes. Let's make sure that we're always on mute. So the first thing is to target the grid container, right? This grid container, everything is contained in this grid. So that's the grid container. That's the grid container. So that's what we are going to target. And on the container there, we need to give the type of display as grid. You can put one flex, but for this one, you're going to use grid. And then what's the next thing? Because it's a grid, because everything that we have, it's inside, everything here showing here, it's inside that grid container. So I'm going to have this grid. The container here is going to display everything inside it as a grid. So a grid is something that you'll be having a row and a column, some rows, some number of rows and some columns, something like that, right? So for me, so for this grid template, I'm going to have some columns. The first one is going to have 200 pixels. And then the middle one is going to be 1FR, which is going to be some leftovers after specifying all my columns, something like that. So I'm going to have 200 pixels and a width as well of 200 pixels on the last. And then the mid one is going to take whatever that was left after subtracting these 200 pixels and 200 pixels on the width. That's why you see here, I have maybe fixed the 200 pixels, and from here fixed 200 pixels. But in between, it is going to take the 1FR, which is some leftovers as space in between here, something like that. So that's how I've decided. So this grid layout is going to have 3 columns, something like that. It's 3 columns. And how many rows, the number of rows is going to be determined by this grid template rows plus this name. So how do I do it? For the first column, I need to have a height of auto. And for the last, the height is going to be auto, which means it is going to be determined by what is inside that that element or that div or something like that, or inside that cell. And then 1FR, is about the middle row, which is this. So we are going to have the first row and the second row and this row. So if you look at it, we are going to have 3 columns by 3 rows. So we're going to have 1, 2, 3 columns, and rows is 1, 2, 3 as our grid, something like that. That's the grid that we're going to have. But if you look at it, this row is very, very big. Why? Because here have said auto, here have said auto, but here have said whatever the space left in between here is the one that you want to use. Something like that. So if I try to change this maybe to maybe 300 pixels, you could see what it can do to this grid. You see that this one is going to be exactly those pixels, something like that. So if you use 1FR there, then everything will be good and sorted. And then the next thing is to assign the grid template areas, right? Since I've said we are going to have 3 columns, which is 1, 2, 3, and the rows we're going to have 3 rows, which is going to be 1, 2, 3. So you need to tell it that on the first row, all the cells are going to have what? Something like that. So on the first rows, we are going to have a header, a div, and a header div, and a header div. So it's as good as on the first cell, second cell, and third cell, you're just going to have one thing. That's why you have one thing here. on this row. Otherwise, definitely header and maybe something but we are going to have one thing. And then for this one, we're going to have the navigation, the content, and the sidebar. So on the middle, we're going to have the navigation, content, and sidebar. On the bottom, you're just going to have footer, something like that. And then this one, the height of the div container, you're going to put 100 VH to take the whole viewport of your window, whatever. So the whole container is going to be from here up to here as the height, something like that. And then the gap is 1 pixels, and the background is this #33, which is just some dark color there. And then now you can design the div tags which are inside the grid container. That's how you can do it. Through grid container, you are targeting a div, and then you can give it some border so that it can have these borders. If I take out maybe this CSS, you could see that I'm not going to get anything there for this. That's why I have this one for background, maybe for padding, as well as for the border there, so that it could be displaying as good as what we have here, something like that. And then after that, now we can now target the header itself. This one, this class, this div, the header itself, and then you give it its grid area, right? Here, that's where you'll be giving its grid area. So this one's going to, this header is going to be inside this header grid area here under this grid area. So it is going to occupy this, and then this nav is going to occupy the nav. This one, this content, this div is going to occupy the content, whatever grid area, something like that, until then you are good to go. So basically, that's how you can use the grid to do all these things. So that's all that I have for today. Maybe questions and contributions are the ones that I might want to attract. Are the ones that I might want to attract. If there are questions, contributions. Yes, Ngoni, you want to say something? You can unmute yourself.
Yes, sir. I wanted to ask earlier on when we were doing the importing of another CSS into another. Now, I wanted to ask a question about conflict. If, for example, in your parent, if you want to call it a parent CCS, you are targeting all headings with H1, and then you import another CSS that also has a different, that's also targeting H1, but assigning, a different style. What happens in that regard?
Okay, that one basically it's like there's some sort of hierarchy, right? When it comes to how CSS affect your HTML elements. So the one or the best example is which one is going to be executed last, and that one will be the one which is going to determine the CSS to be used. Unless if you mark it important, then it will override other CSS styles that you have done. So for example, if you have got an inline style that you have inside your HTML, and you are importing the CSS through the external links, whatever, it means that the inline have got a final say than what you are importing from outside that file. So it's as good as when you are now importing the CSS file through another CSS file, where are you importing? So if it is at the top, it's going to be executed first, which means the code which is in the CSS file itself, which is not being imported, is going to be executed last, and then hence it will be the last to affect your HTML element, something like that. I hope you answered there.
Yes, thank you.
Yep. Then Mark, you want to say something? You can unmute yourself. You are muted. Yes.
Yes, thank you. Yeah. So if I answer my question, ask my question. So in terms of CSS, there's what is called specificity, right? So if you target an element by its ID, naturally that one will be higher on the hierarchy. And like you said, if you use inline styles, they will have precedence over the other ones. And then if they have the same precedence, like if you target the HTML tag H1, and then you set the color to red, and then somewhere below on the same CSS, you target again the same element, and then you change to green, it will apply the last one. So first it applies the specificity, then afterwards it checks which one comes last on the code, the last declaration. So for my question, I wanted to ask, so in the exam, for example, for applying JavaScript or CSS, it's mostly going to be inline, right?
Not not it's going to be mostly in line. I think it's up to you. It's up to you. You can have a code for a CSS file, and you can actually even include it in your HTML code. So it's up to you to do what you think is the best for the question. If you are going to apply in a line, apply in a line. If you are going to use internal style sheets, apply internal style sheets. So, I'm just saying it's open and up to you to apply what's best and what works best. If you look at this example, I've used the internal CSS style. I've put it inside the head. You cannot do this under inline here. And for container, you put the whatever the CSS for container, which is all these CSS inside one element here, then it will be a mess. It will be a mess. And that's not the best that you can do. So please, on that one, be guided accordingly. I think I've tried my best to answer your question, and I hope you are answered. Any other question? Otherwise, I need to stop the recording if there are no questions or contributions. So, Tafadzwa, you want to ask something?